If slow burn stories about a single mom painting from the backseat of her car, a chef hiding his own scars, and a community learning how to help without stealing someone's story move you, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next cinematic story on this channel. By midnight, the rain had stopped pretending to be gentle. It came down in hard, slanting sheets, hammering the hood of the silver hatchback until the metal seemed to vibrate. Inside, the air smelled like crayons, damp clothes, and the faint lemon of the hand wipes Riley Torres kept in the glove compartment. She sat in the driver's seat with her knees pulled up, a cheap sketchbook braced against them. The dome light was off. She'd learned that lesson the first night, when the battery had nearly died. Now she worked by the glow of the street lamp that leaked through the fogged windshield. The raindrops made the light wobble. On the page, a doorway appeared in quick, careful strokes, steel and painted black, with a narrow window streaked by water. Above it, the faint curve of a neon sign reading Elysee reflected backward. She drew the way the puddles in the alley caught the amber spill from the kitchen, turning broken concrete into little shards of gold. Her fingers cramped. She kept going. In the back seat, under a pile of thrift store blankets, 4-year-old Ellie snored softly. Every few minutes, the little girl's hand would twitch, seeking the plush bear with one intact ear. When she found it, her body settled again. Riley paused and looked back at her daughter. Ellie's curls were matted from the humidity. There was a smear of something, probably tomato sauce from the free staff meal Riley had slipped into a napkin earlier and split with her. One day, Riley thought, Ellie would be old enough to piece these nights together into a story. She didn't want that story to just be about surviving in a car behind a fancy restaurant. She wanted there to be color, images, proof that even here, memorized in this wet, cramped little space, they were alive. She shaded the darkest corners of the drawing, where the alley vanished into shadow. The rain rat-a-tat-tatted on the roof. Ellie coughed once, a thin, wet sound, and rolled over. A draft slid through some unseen gap in the door seal. Riley snapped the sketchbook shut and rubbed her thumbs against her jeans until the chill in them felt like hers again. She checked the rearview mirror out of habit. The alley behind the Manhattan restaurant Elysee was one of the only places she'd found where nobody seemed to care that her car lingered past closing. There were cameras, but they pointed at the doors, not the back wall. The dumpsters provided cover. The massive industrial fan on the roof masked the hum of the hatchback's engine when she ran it for a few minutes to take the edge off the cold. She'd been careful, too careful to get caught, not careful enough to stay dry. A shadow moved across the rearview mirror. Riley stiffened and rain blurred the glass, but the shape solidified into a person walking toward the car. Her chest tightened. She hissed, Ellie, under her breath, not to wake her, but to anchor herself to the fact that she wasn't alone. The figure reached the driver's side window and lifted a hand, knuckles rapped lightly against the glass. Riley's first thought was, they're going to tow us. Her second was worse, they're going to call someone and say a child's sleeping in a car. Both thoughts drenched her in a different kind of cold. She took a breath and cracked the window an inch. Rain blew in, cold and sharp. Yeah, she asked, voice low and wary. The man outside stepped back half a pace, palms raised in a universal gesture of stay calm. He wore a dark coat over something white, and his hair was plastered to his forehead. His eyes, when the light caught them, were tired but not unkind. Sorry, he said, pitching his voice just loud enough to be heard over the rain and the distant hum of the city. Didn't mean to startle you. You did, Riley said. He grimaced. Fair, he said. I work in the kitchen in there. He tipped his chin toward the glowing door of Elysee. I've noticed your car a few nights. Figured you weren't just very dedicated to takeout. Her jaw tightened. We're leaving, she said. I just needed a place to park for a bit. We're not. It's okay, he cut in gently. You're not in trouble. I just wanted to ask if you and your kid wanted somewhere dry to sleep for the night. Riley's hand tightened on the steering wheel. You've been watching us, she asked. Not like that, he said quickly. More like, I go out for air, and your car is always here when I finish the shift. I know what that usually means. What means, she challenged, though they both knew. He hesitated. That home isn't an address right now, he said softly. It's wherever the engine turns over. The words hit a place it bodied her she tried not to poke. He nodded toward the building. We've got a staff room upstairs, he said. Couch, blankets, a shower that occasionally cooperates. Nobody's using it tonight. You could borrow it. No forms, no questions. Riley laughed once, a short, harsh sound. Just like that, she said. Some random kitchen guy decides to offer a hotel suite above a Michelin-starred restaurant to the woman sleeping in the alley. A corner of his mouth lifted. We're not Michelin, he said. We just like to act like we might be someday. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets. My name's Adrian. He added, night shift. You don't have to give me yours if you don't want to. You don't have to say yes. But the offer's there. A gust of wind sent rain spattering harder against the glass. Ellie coughed again, that rasping little sound that made Riley's stomach twist. She looked back at her daughter, then at the man standing in the rain, getting soaked for a conversation he could have avoided. Is it safe, she asked finally. Yes, he said simply. Safe for my kid, she pressed. His jaw clenched, like the idea that she'd have to ask that hurt him. Especially for your kid, he said. She searched his face. She didn't see pity there. She saw something else. Something like recognition. She sighed, long and shaky. Okay, she said. One night. His shoulders dropped in what looked like relief. One night, he agreed. I'll get towels. The staff room at Elysee was not a hotel suite. The couch had seen better days. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. A mountain of laundry slumped in one corner. But to Riley, hauling a half-asleep Ellie up the back stairs, it felt like stepping into another world. Adrian handed her a stack of towels that smelled like detergent and citrus. There's a shower down the hall, he said. Water takes 3 minutes to stop pretending it's Arctic. You'll hear the pipes complain. That's normal. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice smaller now, stripped of the alley's defensive echo. He considered her. Someone did it for me once. Oh, he said, I owe the universe a few of these. He nodded toward Ellie, who had flopped onto the couch and immediately curled around her bear. Get her dry, he said. And you. I'll leave some food on the table. I have to go yell at a stock pot. He turned to go. Adrian, she called after him, surprising herself. He looked back. Yeah, she hesitated. Thanks, she said. He smiled, brief and real. You're welcome, he replied. Take your time. Nobody's going to bother you up here. When he left, the room felt suddenly larger. Riley sat on the edge of the couch for a moment, watching Ellie's chest rise and fall. The little girl's lashes were clumped together from the rain. Her socks were soaked. Riley peeled them off carefully, wincing at the chilly, wrinkled skin beneath. She took a towel to Ellie's hair, gentle and quick, then draped another over her own shoulders and patted down the hall to the shower. The pipes did complain. The water did turn warm after 3 minutes, steam fogging the cracked mirror. Under the spray, alone for the first time in days, she put her hands on the wall and let the heat beat the alley out of her bones. No one saw her face crumple. No one heard the sound she made. It wasn't a sob, exactly, more like a long exhale of something she'd been holding for weeks. When she returned, bare feet quieter than her thoughts, Ellie was still sleeping. A damp curl stuck to her forehead. On the small table by the microwave, someone had left a bowl of soup covered in plastic wrap, a mug with a tea bag waiting, and a folded note. And she picked it up. If you need to park behind the restaurant again, it read in neat handwriting. The silver hatchback is mine as far as security is concerned. They'll leave you alone. Adrian, she stared at the words. He was staking a claim on her car, on her right to exist in that sliver of concrete. It was such a simple sentence. It felt like a shield. She sank onto the floor next to the couch, pulled her knees to her chest, and, in the thin humming light of the staff room, opened her sketchbook. She drew Ellie's hand flung over the side of the couch, the chipped edge of the table, the bowl waiting under its little dome of plastic, the note propped up like a tiny tent. She shaded the steam she imagined rising from the soup when she peeled the cover back. For the first time in a long time, she didn't draw from a distance. She drew from inside the warmth she'd been allowed into. The shelter in Queens looked nothing like the glossy brochures Riley had seen at social services offices. It was a squat brick building with bars on the lower windows and a sign that said Women and Children's Center in peeling blue paint. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of noodles, disinfectant, and too many people trying to take up as little space as possible. Riley didn't go there because she trusted the system. She went because Ellie's cough had gotten worse. It rattled too deep in her chest now. The staff at Elysee had been kind. Arian had left a note about the car and looked the other way when she washed dishes quietly at the prep sink to feel useful. But you couldn't raise a child in a staff room in an alley forever. So she filled out the forms with cramped fingers, wrote currently sleeping in vehicle in the little box for current address, and handed over her ID, twitching with reluctance. They assigned her a bunk in a room with 3 other women and 3 kids, all of them wearing the same expression of exhausted alertness. That's where she met Louis. He wasn't supposed to be there. Not technically. He'd aged out of the children allowed policy long ago. But he'd been staying on the edge of the shelter so long, the staff had stopped trying to shuffle him out. He took up residence near the window in the common room, a chipped mug of coffee permanently glued to his hand, a stack of newspapers no one else wanted at his feet. The first time he spoke to Riley, she was hunched over a plastic table, trying to coax Ellie into eating a bowl of something beige and overcooked. "You draw," he said. It wasn't a question. Riley glanced up, ready with a reflexive no. Then she saw he was looking at the sketchbook she'd left half under her tray. A corner of the page showed a slice of the alley. She hadn't closed it properly. "A little," she said cautiously. Louis smiled. It was a surprisingly gentle thing on his wind-chapped face. "You either draw or you don't," he said. "There's no a little?" He set his coffee down. "Wait here," he added, and shuffled off. Riley watched him disappear into the crowded hallway, then looked at Ellie, who was pushing peas around with the resigned patience of a child used to compromise. When Louis came back, he held something small and square. He slid it onto the table in front of her. A tin of watercolors, the cheap kind sold for kids' school supplies. But the cakes inside were barely used. "Got this in a donation box," he said. Figured they meant it for someone who still remembers what it feels like to start. She opened it. The colors looked like possibility pressed into circles. "Why me?" she asked. He shrugged. "I see you looking at the world like it's a frame, though," he said. "Like you're already painting it in your head. Might as well give the poor brain a break and put it on paper." He nodded toward Ellie. "And she'll need those pictures someday," he added. "Not just to remember that she survived this, but that she lived. There's a difference. The words landed somewhere deep and sore. Riley closed the tin carefully. "Thank you," she said. "No charge," he replied. "Just don't waste it on portraits of me. The world's had enough of this face." He grinned, and she found herself smiling back. That night, after lights out, while Ellie snuffled in her bunk and the other women whispered on their phones, Riley sat in the hallway under an exit sign and mixed color with an old plastic cup. She painted the inside of the hatchback, the condensation on the windows, the way the street lamp turned raindrops into trembling halos. She painted Ellie's face in sleep, slack and peaceful in a way she never managed when awake. She painted Louis's window and the coffee mug and the way the fluorescent light made everything look like a faded photograph. Each brushstroke felt like staking a tiny claim against oblivion. "We were here," the water said as it dried. "We existed." On Saturdays, when the weather cooperated and the shelter had enough staff to cover the afternoon, Riley went to the farmer's market. She didn't have much to buy. Sometimes she splurged on a bag of bruised apples or a loaf of bread at the end of the day when prices dropped. But mostly she went to set up her little square of cloth near the edge of the stalls, pin her paintings to a makeshift string, and hope. The first day she did it, she made a sign out of a torn cardboard box. "Art from the back seat," she wrote in thick marker. "Pay what you can." A few people stopped. Most breezed past. One woman asked if the paintings were prints. "They're originals," Riley said, cheeks hot. "Just this size," the woman sniffed. Walking away. By noon, her feet were numb, and she was wondering if she'd made a mistake lugging the portfolio all the way here. Ellie sat on a milk crate beside her, humming to herself and drawing with a stubby crayon on the corner of the sign. A crooked car took shape, a stick figure with wild hair behind the wheel. Is that me? Riley asked. And me, Ellie said firmly, adding a smaller stick body in the back seat. And bear. She added a vaguely bear-shaped blob. The next person to stop was a woman with a camera slung around her neck and a tote bag overflowing with beets. She had the kind of haircut that said she hadn't decided whether to grow it out or cut it all off, and an expression that spoke of mild, permanent curiosity. She tilted her head at the paintings. Did you paint these? She asked. Yes, Riley said, bracing for the critique. They're specific, the woman said. Riley wasn't sure if that was good. I write about food and the city, the woman went on. Mostly restaurants, but sometimes the things that orbit them. I've seen this door before. She pointed at a painting of a back entrance, the metal slick with rain. You have? Riley asked. Elise, the woman said. I've reviewed them. That hinge, I've cursed at it while trying not to drop my notebook during deliveries. She laughed. I'm Nora, she added. Nora Sinclair. The name tugged at something faint and distant. Riley might have seen it in a byline. On an article she'd scrolled past on someone else's cracked phone at the diner. What made you start painting? This Nora asked, gesturing at the cluster of wet alleys and fogged windows. Riley's instinct was to shrug and say, I like the light. She looked at Ellie instead, the little girl now drawing circles around the stick car on the cardboard. My daughter and I were sleeping in our car behind that restaurant, she said quietly. It was either cry all night or paint. I guess I picked paint. Nora's expression shifted. Not pity, something closer to anger on someone else's behalf. Are you still, she began, working on changing that, Riley said, feeling exposed. Nora nodded slowly. May I write about this, she asked. No names, if you'd prefer. Just, there's something here people need to see. Riley hesitated. Her chest remembered the feeling of spotlights in abstract, though she'd never stood in one. I don't want to be a charity case, she said. You're not, Nora replied. You're an artist. And an artist sleeping in a hatchback painting the back door of one of the city's most talked about restaurants is, well, if I made that up, my editor would tell me to tone it down. Riley huffed a short laugh. As long as you don't make it sound like a fairy tale, she said. Nora lifted her camera. No fairy tales, she promised. Just the rain. She took a picture of Riley's hands holding a paintbrush over a half-finished scar. She took another of Ellie's cardboard drawing, the stick figures in the car. Then she bought 3 paintings, paid more than Riley would have dared ask, and walked away, already pulling out her notebook. The article went up 2 days later. Riley didn't see it when it first landed. She was at her dishwashing shift in the back of Elise, hands slippery with soap, the spray of the hose drowning out most other sounds. But the ripples reached her quickly. Hey, Torres, one of the line cooks called, holding up his phone. You've got a fan. He waggled the device. She frowned, tossing a handful of silverware into the sanitizer. What are you talking about? She asked. He turned the screen toward her. There, between ads for cookware and a photo of some gleaming plated duck, was a shot of her hands and a caption. She paints the back door of the city's most coveted kitchen from the backseat of her car. By Nora Sinclair. Riley's stomach dropped. She wiped her hands and took the phone, eyes scanning. The piece wasn't long. Nora described walking through the market, stumbling on the tiny booth, recognizing the door in the painting as the back entrance of Elise, a bridge between the world of starched tablecloths and the vans that bring in produce before dawn, and learning, in gentle strokes, that the artist had been living in her car, that she now sometimes slept in a shelter, that her work was literally art from the back seat. There were no names, no pictures of her face, but there was enough. In the comments, people speculated. One wrote, I know that alley. Pretty sure she's talking about Elise in Midtown. Another, if this is Elise, I hope they're taking care of her. Another tagging @LICNYC and @Adrian Hale. Y'all seen this. Riley's finger hovered over the username. She tapped. The account it led to was a grid of perfect plates and moody shots of the dining room. In a handful of photos, a man stood at the pass, plating dishes, his expression focused. Dark hair, tired eyes, not so different from the face that had knocked on her car window in the rain. She scrolled to the handle in the bio at Adrian Hale. She glanced toward the kitchen door. Adrian was there, speaking quietly with the sous chef. He wore his usual black apron, a towel tucked at his hip. He didn't look like someone whose name trended on food blogs and whose dishes people saved up months to taste. He looked like the man who had left soup and a note in a staff room. Her pulse sped up. When he turned and caught her looking, he frowned. "You okay?" he asked, stepping into the dish pit's steamy threshold. "You're the owner," she blurted. He blinked. The what? Elise? She said, chopping the syllables like anger. Adrian Hale. The Adrian Hale who's on magazine covers. The Adrian Hale people tag under photos of lamb they can't pronounce. His mouth opened, then closed. "You Googled me," he said. "I saw an article," she said, "about a homeless mom painting your back door from her car." He winced. "Damn it, Nora," he muttered under his breath. Then, to Riley, "I didn't know she was going to publish it that fast." "Doesn't matter," Riley said. "You told me you were night shift." "I am," he replied. "I also happen to sign the paychecks. Both things can be true." "You let me think you were just a line cook," she said, hurt and disbelief mixing. "I let you talk to me like a person, not a potential sponsor," he said quietly. "There's a difference." The dish machine hissed. Steam rose between them. "I didn't lie about my name," he added. "You didn't ask about my last one." She hated how reasonable that sounded. Her voice cracked. "Do you know what it feels like to have your entire life boiled down into 4 paragraphs that end with people tagging your boss and asking if he's saving you like a side project?" He closed his eyes for a second, as if bracing himself against something that had nothing to do with her. "More than you think," he said softly. When he opened them, they were steady. "I should have told you more," he said. "Before it got big. I'm sorry." The apology was simple. It landed in a complicated place. Riley wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly exhausted. "I need some air," she said. He stepped aside. As she pushed out the back door into the alley, the rain had eased to a mist. She leaned against the brick wall where she'd once leaned from the inside of her car and tried to breathe through the strange sensation of being both seen and rearranged. Clara West arrived at the shelter 3 days later. She did not belong there, and she wore her out-of-placeness like perfume. Her heels clicked on the linoleum. Her umbrella was the kind that snapped open with a sharp, satisfying sound. Her hair was perfect. Her lipstick was perfect. And her smile was the kind Riley had seen on people who'd come into the diner to apologize before they asked for your section for their favorite waiter. "Riley Torres," she asked. Crisp and bright. Riley, who'd been sitting at a table helping Ellie color in a photocopied picture of a snowman, looked up warily. "Depends who's asking," she said. "I'm Clara," the woman said, sliding into the chair opposite her as if this were a networking brunch. "I handle public relations and talent for Elise, and a few other places you might have heard of." Riley's stomach sank. She'd been expecting some kind of contact. She hadn't been expecting it to wear a blazer this sharp. Clara set a tablet on the table and tapped the screen. A web page sprang to life, showing Nora's article, Riley's paintings, the comments. "This piece is gaining traction," Clara said. "And Adrian's story about you." Riley's eyebrows shot up. "His story about me," she echoed. Clara backpedaled smoothly. "I mean the story that's forming," she said. "People are fascinated. Single mom, backseat artist. The contrast with the restaurant, it's compelling. That's the word we use." Riley's jaw clenched. "I'm not a pitch deck," she said. "Of course not," Clara said, her smile tightening only slightly. "You're an artist, which is why I'm here." She swiped to another screen. Mock-ups. A poster, Riley Torres, from car to canvas. A grainy, tasteful shot of a hatchback under a streetlight. A paintbrush clenched in a silhouetted hand. Riley stared at it. "No," she said automatically. "Hear me out," Clara said quickly. "We're putting together a campaign, a dinner, a show at Elysee featuring your work. Partial proceeds go to shelters like this one. We can line up collectors, gallery owners. We can get you a studio space. Actual walls that aren't made of metal or cinder block. The word studio space pinged off something deep in Riley's chest. She imagined a room that was hers, a table that didn't have to be cleared before someone else's shift. Ellie's drawings taped to a wall that wasn't borrowed. "What's the catch?" she asked. Clara laughed lightly. "Artist," she said. "Always suspicious, never boring." She slid a folder out of her bag and opened it. "There's a contract," she said. "Standard representation. I'd be your agent. 10% on sales. We handle branding." "Branding," Riley repeated flatly. "We need to shape the narrative," Clara said. "Make sure people understand the arc. From the backseat of a car to the walls of one of the city's most coveted dining rooms." "It's perfect." "It's not an arc," Riley said. "It's my life." "That's what makes it powerful," Clara replied. "Adrian's on board." "The board is on board, no pun intended. They want to make this their flagship community initiative. You become the face of Elise's new Garage to Gallery program." Riley heard the capital letters in the phrase. She also heard what Clara didn't say. "We attach your story to our brand. We sell empathy alongside steak. And if I don't want my face on your whatever that is," she asked. Clara's smile thinned. "We don't have to overthink this," she said. "Think about Ellie. About never sleeping in that car again. About health insurance. School. All you have to do is show up, tell your story, pose for a few photos. The rest, we can script." Riley flinched at the word. "Script." She looked over at Ellie, who was coloring the snowman's hat bright orange, tongue poking out in concentration. Script meant someone else would decide which parts of their nights counted. "Is this Adrian's idea?" she asked slowly. Clara hesitated. "He supports it," she said. "Did he ask for it?" Riley pressed. "Does it matter?" Clara replied, a hint of impatience seeping through. "The opportunity is in front of you either way." Riley closed the folder. She pushed it back across the table. "I need time," she said. Clara's eyes cooled a fraction. "Time is not our friend," she said. "Momentum like this is rare. But fine, I'll call you tomorrow." She stood smoothly, scooped up her tablet, and offered a hand Riley didn't take. "We're trying to help you," Clara said. "You're trying to help yourselves," Riley said quietly, "and hoping it helps me too." Clara's smile froze, just for a second. Then she turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking down the hallway like punctuation marks. The night of the Elise dinner, the restaurant felt like a movie set. Candles burned in heavy glass holders. White tablecloths flowed to the floor. On the walls, in place of the usual abstract art, hung Riley's paintings. The alley, the back door, the hatchback roof glistening under streetlights. Ellie's sleeping face, rendered in layers of transparent blue and gray in a thin streak of gold. Small placards beneath them read, "From car to canvas, works by Riley Torres." Riley stood just inside the entrance, clutching the strap of her thrift store dress. The shelter staff had insisted she borrow it from the donation closet. "You're going to a fancy dinner," one had said, pressing the navy fabric into her hands. "Let them know you belong there." She didn't feel like she belonged. Every clink of glass sounded too loud. Every laugh felt like it curved around her. In the kitchen, Adrian moved with his usual controlled urgency, calling out orders, tasting, adjusting. He checked on the dining room every few minutes, eyes scanning for spills, empty plates, signs of trouble. He found Riley by the wall where rain on the staff door hung. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly. "Like a canvas that got stretched too tight," she said. He huffed a soft laugh. "If it's any consolation," he said, "the duck is on the verge of being overcooked. And the pastry chef forgot the lavender in the tart. So you're not the only one having a rough night." She glanced at him. "Did you know about all of this?" she asked, nodding toward the placards, the program on each plate touting Elise's new social initiative. "Yes and no," he admitted. "I signed off on the idea of showcasing your work. I didn't sign up for half the copy on these cards." He picked one up and grimaced. "A chef's kindness lifted a mother from the rain," he read. "Jesus. I didn't lift anything. I opened a door." "You let them write it," she said. "I let them think they could write it." He corrected. There's a difference. I'm working on fixing that. Before she could ask what he meant, the lights dimmed slightly. Clara took the stage. She looked flawless. Of course. The microphone loved her. Good evening, she said, her voice warm and amplified. Thank you for joining us tonight as we celebrate not just the food of Élysée, but the heart behind it. Riley's stomach twisted. Tonight, Clara went on, we launch our From Car to Canvas initiative, partnering with local shelters to support mothers and children finding their way home. At the center of this story is a woman whose courage and talent have moved us all. Riley's ears began to ring. She heard words like sleeping in her car and found by our compassionate chef and transformed into an artist. Transformed, as if she hadn't been one before the rain. Riley, Clara said brightly, looking into the crowd. Would you join us up here? Every head turned. Riley's heart pounded. She could feel Adrian's gaze on her. Louis's voice echoed in her mind. Don't let them take the difference between surviving and living away from her. Her feet moved, not toward the door, toward the stage. She climbed the couple of steps, the room blurring into a sea of faces and glass. Clara held out the microphone, expecting a simple thank you. Riley took it. It felt heavier than it looked. For a moment, she couldn't find her voice. Then she did. My name is Riley Torres, she said. The amplification startled her. She swallowed. A lot of what you just heard is true, she said. I did sleep in my car. I did park it behind this restaurant. I did paint what I saw. Because if I didn't, I was afraid this part of our life would vanish like it never happened. She looked at the paintings on the wall. At the shelter I met a man who gave me a box of watercolors and told me to paint it all. She said, the good, the bad, the nights we were soaked and the nights someone left soup on a table upstairs. For my daughter, so she would remember not just that she survived, but that she lived. She turned back to the crowd. There were nights when nobody knocked on the window, she said. Nights when the car was so cold my hands went numb on the steering wheel. Those nights didn't make it into the program on your plates. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Adrian watched from the kitchen doorway, chest tight. Adrian did something kind. Riley continued. He opened a door and gave us a place to dry off. I will always be grateful for that. But he didn't rescue us. We still had to line up at this shelter. We still had to fill out forms that asked for our whole lives in little boxes. She took a breath. I'm not saying this to embarrass anyone, she said. I'm saying it because if you're gunning to hang my paintings on these walls and use my story to raise money, I want the whole story up there. Not just the part where it makes you feel good about being here. She glanced down at Clara, whose smile had frozen. If that's too much, Riley finished, if my truth is bad for business, you can take the paintings down. I'll hang them back in the shelter hallway. They've seen worse frames. For a moment, silence hung heavier than any chandelier. Then someone at the back clapped once. It sounded loud in the quiet. Another joined. The applause that followed wasn't the wild, hollering kind from cooking shows. It was slower, more uncertain, more honest. Riley handed the microphone back. She didn't wait for Clara's response. She stepped off the stage, weaving through the tables, ignoring the eyes, and walked out the back door into the alley. The rain had started again, softer now. She tilted her face up into it, let it wash the heat from her skin. In the kitchen, pots bubbled, orders came and went. Life resumed its choreography. Behind her, someone called her name. She didn't turn. Not yet. Backstage, Clara was furious. You let her hijack the narrative, she hissed at Adrian, who had come up to the pass just in time to catch the end of Riley's speech. She reclaimed it, he said. We had donors in that room, Clara snapped. Investors? I had to talk 3 different board members down from walking out. Maybe they needed the walk, he replied. She glared. This could cost us, she said. Our image, our expansion plans. The whole point was to show how Élysée lifts people up. Now we look like we tried to script a poor woman's life. He met her gaze. That is what we tried to do, he said calmly. And she called us on it. Clara threw up her hands. You're impossible, she said. You think just because you slept behind a kitchen once you understand. Twice, he cut in. 2 nights. 14 years old. No coat. I remember every tile on that alley. She blinked. He'd never said it that plainly in a meeting before. The chef who pulled me inside didn't put me on a poster. He went on. He handed me a mop and a bowl of stew and told me I could stay as long as I worked. He didn't rewrite my story to make himself look good. He took a breath. If the price of expansion is silencing the people we say we're helping, he said, then maybe we don't need to expand. Clara stared at him. The board will crucify you, she said. He thought of Riley's face on stage, the tremor in her voice, the steadiness of her gaze. Then at least it'll be for something that matters, he replied. He stepped around her, grabbed a towel from the hook, and pushed through the swinging door into the alley. The rain hit his cheeks, cool and clean. Riley stood with her back against the wall, eyes closed, the staff entrance light haloing her. You okay, he asked. She opened her eyes. Ask me tomorrow, she said. He half smiled. Tomorrow, he echoed. I can do that. They stood in the drizzle, the alley that had once been her bedroom, and his teenage refuge wrapping around them. I'm sorry, he said. For what she asked, for not stopping this sooner, he said. For not seeing how quickly good intentions turn into marketing copy. For letting them tell your story like it was mine to give. She shrugged, though her shoulders trembled, and, you did open the door, she said. I should have locked a few others, he replied. How bad is it in there, she asked. Messy, he said, but maybe the kind of messy we needed. She stared at the puddles. What happens now, she asked. Now, he said, I go back in there and tell them they can't use your paintings or your name without your consent. She snorted softly. Good luck with that, she said. He smiled. Maybe I'll write a letter, he said. I'm told those can be powerful. Letters, she asked. He shook his head. Never mind, he said. Just, if you disappear for a while, will you leave me a forwarding address this time? She looked at him sharply. You think I'm going to disappear, she asked. I think you're going to go wherever feels safest for Ellie, he said. And I think you'll do it quietly because that's how you've survived. He wasn't wrong. She swallowed. I left something in the staff room, she said. If you find it, it's not for the campaign, it's for you. Then she stepped away from the wall, pulled her hood up, and walked down the alley. He watched until she turned the corner. Then he went back inside. Riley left the shelter at dawn 2 days later. She didn't tell many people. Louis got a hug and a promise to send pictures if she ever had a real studio. The staff got a signed form. Ellie got a whispered explanation in the early light. Are we going back to the car? Ellie asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. No, Riley said. We're going somewhere with more walls. She'd been accepted into a transitional housing program in a different borough, small rooms, shared kitchen, rules, but a door that locked and a bed that wasn't bolted to a frame someone else had slept in last night. They took what they could carry, the hatchback, its registration expired and its engine finally giving up, stayed in the lot behind the shelter like a shed snakeskin. In the staff room at Elysee, in the corner where she'd once sat sketching under humming lights, she left a wooden box. Inside were her early sketchbooks, the ones with the rawest nights, a pack of chamomile tea, and a note. If you find this, know that I still believe in kindness. I just need to tell my story my own way. Two. When Adrian found it, late one night after the last table had paid and the last glass had been polished, he sat on the edge of the couch Riley had used and read the note 3 times. He traced the letters with his thumb. He thought of the boy he had been, shivering behind a different restaurant, wishing someone would see him. He thought of the girl in the alley whose car he had claimed as his to keep security away. He thought of how quickly help turns into ownership if you're not careful. Then he opened a blank document on his laptop. He began to type. Dear woman who painted the rain from the back seat of a silver hatchback. He wasn't sure why he wrote it as a letter. Maybe because he knew she might never read it. Maybe because he needed to say things out loud to himself in words that didn't fit in meetings. He wrote about the night he first knocked on her window, about the soup and the note, and the way her kid's small hand had clutched a bear with one ear. He wrote about the shame he felt watching her story turned into a pitch. He wrote about how much easier it is to plate a perfect lamb than to hold a messy truth. He didn't use her name. He didn't use the restaurants. He hit publish on his little, rarely updated blog that mostly housed essays about why stockpots matter and how to break down a fish without crying. He closed his laptop and went home. He didn't expect anyone to notice. But Nora did. She saw the letter because she followed his blog, because she liked chefs who thought about more than salt. She read it through twice. Then she shared it with a simple caption. The post spread, slower than scandal, but surer. People argued, as they always do. Some praised the honesty. Some accused it of performative remorse. But some read it and didn't comment at all. They just forwarded it to friends with a line like, "This made me think about how we talk about helping people." In meetings around the city, phrases like lived experience and consent started to appear on whiteboards. At Elysee, the board met. They were not thrilled. But Adrian, for once, didn't come alone. He brought shelter staff. He brought Luis, who showed up in a donated button-down shirt that didn't quite hide his tattoos. He brought Nora, who spoke calmly about narratives and exploitation. Together, they proposed something small but stubborn, a studio space in a converted garage a few blocks away, funded in part by Elysee and in part by a community arts grant. A place for people who had slept in cars, on couches, under overpasses, to paint and write and shoot photos, not for campaigns, for themselves. Garage Light Studio, someone called it, looking at the way the sunlight slanted through the doors in the afternoon. The name stuck. A year later, the rain came back, softer, this time. The underpass that sheltered Garage Light's front plaza dripped in places, but the tarp stretched between poles caught most of it. Under them, tents and tables formed a small, messy constellation. Canvases leaned against walls. Clips held sketches on twine. A kid sat cross-legged on the ground, reading a poem into a microphone that squealed every few words. Adrian stood at the edge of it all, holding a cardboard pastry box. He felt oddly more nervous than he had the night of the Elysee dinner. He'd stood in front of critics and investors. This felt more like standing on a precipice he couldn't see the bottom of. "Chef," he turned. Louis shuffled up, coffee mug in hand, the rain beating on his worn jacket. "You made it," Adrian said. Louis snorted. "You promised real food," he said. "None of that microgreens nonsense." Adrian lifted the pastry box. "Lavender and lemon tart," he said, "with a crust that took me 5 tries to get right, because someone once said they liked the way lavender smells in rain." Louis's eyes twinkled. "She's here," he said, jerking his chin toward the far tent. Adrian followed his gaze. Riley stood near a cluster of canvases, a Garage Light hoodie on over jeans, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She was talking to a small group of teenagers, gesturing with paint-stained hands, laughing at something one of them said. Ellie darted between easels, taller now, her curls longer, her bear tucked into the pocket of her sweatshirt. Adrian's chest ached in a way he hadn't let it since he was a teenager. She looked not the same as the last time he'd seen her in the alley. More anchored, more herself. "Go on," Louis said, "before the rain eats the tarps." Adrian started forward. His shoes slipped a little on the damp concrete. As he approached, Riley glanced up. Their eyes met. For a second, the noise of the plaza laughter, a badly tuned guitar, the hiss of a portable coffee machine faded. "Hey," she said. It felt too small a word for the distance between then and now. "Hey," he replied. He lifted the box a little, awkward. "I brought a peace offering," he said. "It may or may not contain scandalous amounts of butter." Her lips curved. "If that's lavender I smell, someone's been paying attention," she said. He exhaled, some tension leaving his shoulders. "I owed you at least 1 tart without a PR stunt attached," he said. She nodded toward the box. "Let's put it on the communal table before Ellie discovers it and claims it as her medium," she said. "She's been painting with anything she can get her hands on." As if summoned, Ellie skidded to a stop beside them, sneakers squeaking on the wet ground. "Hi, Adrian," she said, as if she'd seen him last week instead of last year. He smiled down at her. "You got taller," he said. "You shrank," she replied solemnly, then giggled. Can I show you my picture? I'd be offended if you didn't, he said. She grabbed his hand and tugged him toward an easel. The painting was small, done in thick strokes that defied the rain. Three figures stood under an awning streaked with color. One tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. Behind them, in simple gray lines, a familiar hatchback shape curved into the background, its windows blue with implied night. Underneath, in Ellie's careful printing, were the words, U.S., not a story. Adrian swallowed hard. That's really good, he said, voice rough. It's us, Ellie said, but not on a stage. Riley's breath caught. She looked at him, eyebrows raised, daring him to argue. He didn't. It's perfect, he said. He turned to Riley. How's the studio, he asked, as a place to actually work, not just pose for photos. She glanced around. Kids huddled under tarps, comparing brushstrokes. A woman in a shelter-issued coat sat at a table, writing furiously in a notebook. Lewis argued with someone about coffee ratios. It leaks when it rains, she said. Smells weird when the sun hits the concrete. The heater makes noises like it's haunted. She smiled. It's home, she added. He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. You did this, he said. We did this? She corrected. You, me, Nora, the board you bullied, the kid who welded the easels. No one person gets to own it. That's kind of the point. Still learning that part, he said. She studied him. You're different, she observed. More gray hair, he offered. More. Here, she said, tapping her chest. Less hiding in the kitchen. He shrugged. Turns out you can't change a system just by seasoning it from the back, he said. Sometimes you have to go out and tell donors they're doing it wrong while they're still chewing. She laughed, the sound mixing with the rain. So, he said slowly, can I ask something potentially stupid? Always, she said. Is there room in this version of your story for me? He asked. Not as the guy who knocked on the window, not as the chef who funds the lights, just as Adrian, who is very bad at tarts unless emotionally motivated. She looked at Ellie, who was now explaining the difference between stories and real life to a bewildered teenage boy. She looked at the $10 tin of watercolors Lewis had turned into a whole wall of work, and she looked at the hatchback outline in her daughter's painting, the way it held them without defining them. There might be, she said, if you understand that this doesn't get tidy, that I'm still messy, that Ellie will probably wake us up at 3 a.m. to tell us about a dream where the car could fly. I understand messy, he said, and flying cars sound like an upgrade from where we started. She tilted her head. You don't get to write the tagline, she added. Noted, he said. No taglines. No posters without your sign-off. No tart-themed campaigns. Maybe one tart campaign, she said, glancing at the pastry box. The world should probably know you finally got the crust right. They stood sure in a plaza that smelled like rain and coffee and acrylic paint, while around them other people's stories unfolded on canvas and in notebooks and in the spaces between words. There was no dramatic swell of music, no freeze frame, just a slow, quiet sense that a circle had closed and another was beginning. Later, when the crowd thinned, they would sit at a long plastic table under the leaky tarp, sharing crooked slices of lavender lemon tart from paper plates. Ellie would fall asleep with her head on Riley's shoulder and her feet in Adrian's lap. Lewis would snore in a folding chair, empty mug dangling from his hand. And above the garage light studio door, a hand-painted sign would creak in the wind, letters running slightly where the paint had met the rain. Inside, on one wall, hung a painting of a silver hatchback under a street lamp, rain streaking the windows. Next to it, small but stubborn, was Ellie's piece. Not a story, not a campaign, not a pitch, just a life, messy, warm, still being painted stroke by careful stroke.